The person who has been hailed as the single most influential biblical interpreter in the world today is ironically not a pastor or a theologian or biblical scholar. He's a Canadian psychologist with no formal theological training. And yet his insights into the scriptures have encouraged and inspired millions, reawakening a highly secular population to the wonders of ancient theological wisdom. As a trained theologian myself, what I found so fascinating about Jordan Peterson's YouTube series on the Bible is how much it resonates with insights from the ancient Orthodox Christian tradition. And it's that interface that I want to bring to life for you in this video. I'm going to highlight some of Peterson's key observations in the very first video of his series and illuminate those observations with even more stunning insights from the riches of the Orthodox Christian tradition. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive right in.
I'm approaching this whole scenario, the biblical stories, as if they're a mystery, fundamentally, because they are. There's a lot we don't understand about them. We don't understand how they came about. We don't really understand how they were put together. We don't understand why they had such an unbelievable impact on civilization. We don't understand how people could have believed them. We don't understand what it means that we don't believe them now, or even what it would mean if we did believe them. And then, on top of all that, there's the additional problem, which isn't specific to me, but is certainly relevant to me, that no matter how educated you are, you're not educated enough to discuss the psychological significance of the biblical stories. But I'm going to do my best. And
now, what's so interesting here is that Peterson introduces his whole series on God in the Bible by invoking this notion of mystery. And why that's interesting is that the Greek word mysteria actually means to reveal. In other words, by approaching God and the Bible as a mystery, Peterson seems to, in fact, miss the fact that the Greek word mysteria actually refers to reality that's otherwise hidden, but now is being revealed for us to encounter and indeed to know and embrace. So in this theological sense, a mystery is not something like a riddle that has to be solved and we're the ones who have to solve it. Rather, it's a hidden reality that we now have access to. And it's ironic because though we missed it, I think that this more theological notion of mystery, mysteria, is actually what makes Peterson so significant today. He sees ancient wisdom, the ancient wisdom of the scriptures, as being a profound and perpetual source of timeless meaning and significance for our humanity. In other words, the fact that no matter what we do, no matter how secular we claim to be, nevertheless, these biblical stories continue to endure and inspire and evoke astonishing works of human creativity and imagination. It all means that the scriptures offer timeless nourishment for our souls. And as a psychologist, Peterson's revealing to us the source of that timeless nourishment and psychological health. Now, I think he's mistaken when he says that we don't understand how people could have believed these stories. In other words, we don't understand why people for thousands and thousands of years believed in God or gods and angels and demons intimately interacting with us. And I think Peterson is overlooking a very important notion that scholars refer to as cosmic piety. Just a cursory survey of ancient sacred texts from cultures all over the world demonstrates that humanity once shared the perspective that the world in which we live is very much brimming with divine life. And as such, every person born into the world was born into a divine obligation. We were all obliged to conform our lives into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose. Now, every ancient culture worked this out in their own unique and specific ways, but the whole of the ancient world shared this common conception of cosmic piety, that the world is filled with divine meaning and purpose, and thus we're all obligated to conform our lives into a harmonious relationship with that divine meaning and purpose. Now, of course, we can push that a step back and ask, where did this cosmic piety come from? Why did all ancient civilizations believe the world was filled with divine meaning and purpose in the first place? And there's a number of explanations for that, but one of the more compelling ones from the world of cultural anthropology is that our religions and rituals are all, in effect, amplifications. They're ripple effects of the very first consciously human encounter with reality. All of our religions and rituals are, in effect, a reproduction in time and space of the astonishment we felt the very first time humanity encountered reality. Isn't that neat? The Roman Catholic essayist G.K. Chesterton likened this to the sense of astonishment that children get from fairy tales. A fairy tale describes a river running with wine so that we might recall the astonishment we felt when we first encountered that they ran with water. And at the very heart of this first encounter with reality is a vertical dimension of being, what we in the Western tradition refer to as God, a being that is high and above us. And what cultural anthropologists virtually all agree on is that the very moment we come into being is coterminous with the very moment we consciously encounter divine life. And so it's no coincidence that in discussing in all of his lectures on God, Jordan Peterson roots those lectures in the book of Genesis, the book of beginnings.
I'm scientifically minded and I'm quite a rational person, and I like to have an explanation for things that's rational and empirical before I look for any other kind of explanation. And I don't want to say that everything that's associated with divinity can be reduced in some manner to biology or to an evolutionary history or anything like that. But insofar as it's possible to do that reduction, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to leave the other phenomena floating in the air because they can't be pinned down. And in that category, I would put the category of mystical or religious experience, which we don't understand at all.
Now, this is one of the key contributions that Jordan Peterson is making in terms of a massive paradigm shift going on in the world. What Peterson just said there represents something called a post-secular perspective. Whereas the secular vision of the world was dualistic in that it insisted on a hard separation between science and religion, post-secularists like Peterson recognized that that dualistic vision of religion versus science has basically collapsed. In fact, the more science discovers, the more religious we find it becoming. So the important point here is that the new science that's emerging is not rediscovering religion simply because of some new philosophically derived tolerance of religion that science can, patronizingly acknowledge. No. Rather, it's science itself discovering fundamentally religious truths inherent in the very nature of the physical world that it's studying, such as is the case with psychology, which of course is Peterson's field of expertise. So this shift towards a postmodern, post-secular, post-dualist science is organic to the scientific process itself. Now, on to the Bible itself. But with all of this insanity going on all around us, feeling somewhat delirious is to be expected, but seriously speaking, gang, do you know if you're at risk of having a stroke? I mean, if you're over the age of 40, it's important to take proactive steps to maintain your health and detect potential issues early on. And that's where Lifeline screening comes in. With their non-invasive and painless screenings, they can help identify your risk of stroke, cardiovascular disease, and other chronic illnesses. Plus, with over 14,000 screening events each year, it's never been more convenient to prioritize your health. Don't wait until it's too late to take action. By scheduling a Lifeline screening today, you'll receive either peace of mind or early detection. Either way, you come out on top. Take control of your health by clicking on that link below and scheduling your screening today.
Okay, now, to understand the first part of Genesis, I'm going to turn, strangely enough, to something that's actually part of the New Testament, and this is a central element of Christianity. And it's a very strange idea, and it's going to take a very long time to unpack, but the idea, this is what John said about Christ. He said, in the beginning was the Word, and so that relates back to Genesis 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Three sentences like that take a lot of unpacking because, well, none of that seems to make any sense whatsoever, really, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was both with God, and the Word was God. So the first question might be, what in the world does that mean? In the beginning was the Word. That's the Logos, actually. And the Logos is embodied in the figure of Christ. So there's this idea in John that whatever Christ is, the Son of God, is not only instantiated in history, say at a particular time and place as a carpenter in some backwoods part of the world, but also something eternal that exists up outside of time and space that was there right at the beginning.
Now, I have to say, this is very fascinating that Peterson is doing this, interpreting the book of Genesis in light of the New Testament. Again, if we go back to one of the major theories of how ritual and religion came about, ritual and religion are the representations, literally the representations of the world as humanity first encountered it, which involves a direct encounter with a vertical dimension of being. So that's why we have the ancient Greek and Roman conception of the golden ages and the biblical Garden of Eden. This is where humanity encounters reality as it directly intersects with eternity. And because that original encounter is with the eternal, that which transcends space and time, then the whole of our humanity, our origin, our meaning, our morality, our ultimate destiny are all entailed in that original encounter. So this sheds light on why Christians throughout the ages have always interpreted Genesis, the beginning, in light of the New Testament, the end, the goal, the purpose of all things. And what links all this together is that Greek term that Jordan Peterson referred to, which is the Logos. The New Testament book of St. John begins with the opening line, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The original term there for word is the Greek word logos. And in the ancient world, the logos referred to that divine principle that harmonized and unified the four elements of the cosmos, right? So that's for you Avatar fans, earth, air, fire, and water. The Greeks and Romans were obsessed with what gave the cosmos its order and symmetry and arrangement. And the answer was a divine principle outside of the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And that's what they called the Logos. Christ in the New Testament is identified as that divine principle. Hence why we have four Gospels, which reveal that the cosmos is being recalibrated around Christ, who is the Logos, the one in whom all things hold together. So when the early church read Genesis, they read Genesis in many respects as the very first incarnation of Christ the Logos. Creation is the original material manifestation of the divine order, the Logos. And so this is fascinating because when the cosmos falls in the sin of Adam and Eve, which Peterson deals with in a later lecture, that integration of all things in the Logos cracks, and the world begins to unravel, as it were. And so the eternal Son of God, that vertical dimension of our encounter with reality, comes down to earth and becomes man in the incarnation. And then the whole cosmos begins to recalibrate around him. So the stars align around him at his birth and Christmas Eve, as it were. The waters realign around him in his baptism in the Jordan. We even see the Spirit descending on him like a dove over the waters in a manner comparable to this description of the Spirit in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The dry land on the third day of creation produces grain and fruit, which becomes the bread and wine identified with Christ's body and blood. The whole of the cosmos, the entire creation, begins to participate in Christ the Logos. Let's finish off with Jordan Peterson's description of the Christian vision of the Trinity.
There's an idea in Christianity that the image of God is a Trinity, right? There's the Father, there's the element of the Father, there's the element of the Son, and there's the element of the Holy Spirit. And it's something like tradition, the spirit of tradition. It's something like the human being as the newest incarnation of that tradition, like the living incarnation of that tradition. And then it's something like the Spirit in people that makes relationship with this and this possible, the Spirit in individuals. And so I'm going to bounce my way quickly through some of the classical metaphorical attributes of God so that we kind of have a cloud of notions about what we're talking about when we return to Genesis 1 and talk about the God who spoke chaos into being. So there's a fatherly aspect. So here's what God as a father is like. You can enter into a covenant with it, so you can make a bargain with it. Now you think about that, money is like that, because money is a bargain you make with the future, right? And so we've structured our world so that you can negotiate with the future. And I don't think that we would have got to the point where we could do that without having this idea to begin with. You can act as if the future is a reality. There's a spirit of tradition that enables you to act as if the future is something that can be bargained with. That's why you make sacrifices, right? And the sacrifices were acted out for a very long period of time, and now they're psychological. We know that you can sacrifice something valuable in the present and expect that you're negotiating with something that represents the transcendent future. And that's amazing human discovery. Like no other creature can do that, to act as if the future is real. To note that you can bargain with reality itself and that you can do it successfully. It's unbelievable. It responds to sacrifice. It answers prayers. I'm not saying that any of this is true, by the way. I'm just saying what the cloud of ideas represents. It punishes and rewards. It judges and forgives. It's not nature. You see, one of the things that's weird about the Judeo-Christian tradition is that God and nature are not the same thing at all. Whatever God is, partially manifest in this logos, is something that stands outside of nature. And I think that's something like consciousness as abstracted from the natural world. So it built Eden for mankind and then banished us for disobedience. It's too powerful to be touched. It granted free will. Distance from it is hell. Distance from it is death. It reveals itself in dogma and in mystical experience, and it's the law. So that's sort of like the fatherly aspect. And then the son-like aspect, it speaks chaos into order. It slays dragons and feeds people with the remains. It finds gold. It rescues virgins. It's the body and blood of Christ. It's a tragic victim and scapegoat and eternally triumphant redeemer simultaneously. It cares for the outcast. It dies and is reborn. It's the king of kings and hero of heroes. It's not the state, but is both the fulfillment and critic of the state. It dwells in the perfect house. It is aiming at paradise or heaven. It can rescue from hell. It cares for the outcast. It's the foundation stone and the cornerstone that was rejected, and it's the spirit of the law. And then it's spirit-like. It's akin to the human soul. It's the prophetic voice. It's the still small voice of conscience. It's the spoken truth. It's called forth by music. It is the enemy of deceit, arrogance, and resentment. It's the water of life. It burns without consuming, and it's a blinding light. Okay, so that's a very well-developed set of poetic metaphors, essentially, right? So these are all, what would you say, glimpses of the transcendent ideal. That's the right way of thinking about it. They're glimpses of the transcendent ideal. And all of them have a specific meaning. And, well, in part, what we're going to do is go over that meaning as we continue with this series.
Now, what I find so fascinating in that otherwise very profound description of God as Trinity is nowhere is his listing of all these poetic attributes. Nowhere did Jordan Peterson ever refer to love. As a matter of fact, I did a word search throughout the entire transcript of this opening lecture, a 2.5-hour lecture, and the word love appears only once, and not with regard to God. And this is unfortunate because you can't talk about the Christian notion of the Trinity in any intelligible way without foregrounding love. Because in the Christian vision, God, who's infinite being, right? God doesn't exist as much as he's existence itself. The fullness of being that is the precondition for the existence of everything that participates in his infinite eternal existence. That existence as God is fundamentally love. And it's expressed and lived out in the infinite fellowship of the Trinity. So the Father expresses his love by giving of himself, emptying himself. The Greek word is kenosis. He empties himself so as to be filled up with the Son and the Spirit. The Son empties himself so as to be filled up with the Father and the Spirit. And the Spirit empties himself so as to be filled up with the Father and the Son. And this vision is so essential because this infinite divine love not only accounts for why God created the cosmos in the first place, which is the sharing of the outflowing, the overabundance of this infinite fountain of love, but it also accounts for how God saves the cosmos when it falls. For when the cosmos falls through humanity's sin, what does God do? How does he rescue it? By emptying himself and becoming human and going down into Hades and rising again, seated at the right hand of the Father to draw the whole of the cosmos back into eternal fellowship with himself. So when the cosmos falls, it's not like God has to do something entirely new or different. This vision of Trinitarian love and delight means that when the cosmos falls, God simply does what he's always, forever been doing. He empties himself in order to draw his creation up back into the infinite fountain of love and delight. So love is what links, as it were, the Trinity with the incarnation. Said differently, the same logic that characterizes the eternal relationships of the Trinity characterizes the rationale for the incarnation itself. Over to you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And before you go, you'll definitely want to check out one of my latest videos on this, on Jordan Peterson leaving Joe Rogan absolutely speechless on the Bible. You're not going to want to miss it. So make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.